Okay, everybody, in this video, I am going to go over the answers to the first 3 or 4 multiple choice questions. I'm going to try to go quickly, so if I go too quickly, pause or ask me for further explanation in class or during remote support. All right, so after you have read and highlighted, as we discussed, highlighted both for main ideas and also for the open response, the Florence Thompson's effect on her grown children using setting, characterization, and important events. I closed my practice test, so it did not save all those annotations, but you have your own. Hopefully, you haven't done the same thing I did. And I'm just going to attack the questions, okay? So don't even review this. Don't watch this video until you've tried it yourself. Otherwise, it's not going to help you at all. All right, so question 1. And remember, what we're looking for is the answer that has the evidence or the best evidence. Sometimes I'll say which of the following is the best answer to the question. That means which of the following is there the most evidence for, okay? So, first question, in snapping an iconic photo, how does paragraph 3 contribute to the development of the passage, right? So, look through all 4 answers thinking about the contribution of paragraph 3. So obviously we have to look at paragraph 3 again. So here it is on the left. As she drove along the nearly deserted road, Lang suddenly saw something interesting. Later, she described it as a crude sign with pointing arrow which flashed by at the side of the road. In handwritten letters on the sign were the words Pea Pickers Camp. And you want to think about the context of this paragraph, meaning what were we talking about before? These first 2 paragraphs were establishing the setting, as we talked about, the driving rain, how she's going down the highway, how she misses her family, and then, of course, this important suspense or foreshadowing. She had no inkling that in the next hour she would create a famous piece of history. So this sentence is leading us right into paragraph 3, where she talks about this, where she noticed the sign. So that means this is sort of like a transition from, oh, she misses her family, oh, suddenly she saw this sign, and a transition to what led her to this story of finding this perfect picture, okay? So you just kind of want to look at it that way. You want to read paragraph 3, look at what was happening before. In other words, look at the topics and try to think about, as a story, because this is a narrative, that what's the narrative structure? And as we just established, paragraphs 1 and 2 are sort of the exposition. We always move from the exposition to the rising action, right? Where events build in suspense toward a conflict, right? So we're sensing that transition right here already, just because, oh, here's the moment where she, begins to discover this photo that changed her life, Lang, that is. All right. So I probably, at this point, don't even have to read the questions to you. You can at least eliminate which ones there is no evidence for in paragraph 3, right? So question A, option A, it suggests Lang's anxiety about being on a deserted road. Nope. There's nothing about anxiety or nervousness. Just because she's on a deserted road doesn't mean she's anxious. That's over-interpreting, right? And they always try to throw a question like that in there, just assuming you're going to think, oh, it's a deserted road, she must be anxious. But no, if there's no evidence, it's not a good answer. So I'm just going to cross that one right out if I can figure out how to use my answer eliminator here. There we go. Okay. How about B? It shows Lang's curiosity about what pea pickers did during the day. Is there any information about what pea pickers did during the day in paragraph 3? No, nothing at all. That is definitely a terrible answer. But they always leave you two answers that are plausible, right? Or that there is some merit to each one. So C says it describes a critical moment that contributed to Lang taking a famous photograph. Does it describe a critical moment? Is there evidence in the text? Lang suddenly saw something interesting. That's a critical moment, right? Later she says, a crude sign, pea pickers camp. So, but the fact that she suddenly saw something interesting right before, at the end of the second paragraph, she had no inkling that she would create a famous piece of history. So, yes, there's good evidence for a critical moment there. What's the last question or option? D, it establishes a contrast between different regions of California through which Lang was driving. Is there any description of different regions? No. So we would call this a pretty easy question. Easy because there's really no evidence for the other three, right? But important because they're making you aware of the role of the paragraph in the passage. That's an author's purpose question. What is the purpose of paragraph 3? Its job is to alert you to this critical moment, right? To shift you from the exposition where we get to know Lang and see the setting of her work that she's doing. And so, it sets you up. This question will help you understand the other questions. All right. I'm going to move on to question 2 since I can't ask you guys if there are any questions. So if there are questions, I will leave it to you to ask me in class, and I will give you time for that, of course. So let's go to question 2. And don't forget, remember, there's no question number standing out on the page. You have to look up here to the top, this gray bar across the top that says session 1, 2 of 22, question 2 of 22. Anyway, which statement best describes the irony expressed in paragraphs 8 and 9 of the story of the migrant mother? All right. Yes, there's a little bit of an intimidation factor here if you've forgotten what's irony, right? I know lots of you guys remember it. We talk about it a lot. But if you don't remember, don't worry. You can read the questions and kind of figure out what irony is, all right? But whether or not you do understand what it means, since this is about paragraphs 8 and 9, which statement best describes the irony of these paragraphs, you, again, need to scroll down and look at these 2 paragraphs. And if you read them, you will see all this description of Thompson talking about herself. So this is the second article where she's saying she did all that work. She profited nothing from the photo, this famous photo. And then paragraph 9 shows how much Dorothea Lang did profit from the photo, how it made her famous, how she earned a Guggenheim Fellowship, which is a big honor. So there's lots of information about, well, that's what it's all about, right? The fact that Thompson did not profit, she didn't get anything out of it, while Lang did. And it also, halfway through paragraph 9, talks about, Thompson actually really contributed to the photo, not just by being in it, but by knowing how to pose, understanding who she was representing and how important it was that she convey something of humanity, something of grace and beauty in her picture, so that people don't just look at suffering, in a way that dehumanizes it. She really put a human face on this suffering. All right, so you just read through and you kind of talk to yourself, just like I did, about what are the topics of those 2 paragraphs. And then again, which statement best describes the irony? So first of all, which statement is most true, right? An irony that's expressed, it has to be true. So you can eliminate answers that don't make any sense, right? So A, Thompson was the focus of other photographs, but no one ever noticed her in them. No, there's no evidence for that. There's nothing about her being in any other photograph. Again, an easy one to eliminate. B, Thompson's children grew up to lead successful lives, yet they were unable to support her. No, there's nothing about that at all. Yes, later in the story, they do struggle when she's in the hospital, but that's not in paragraphs 8 and 9, right? Which statement describes the irony in paragraphs 8 and 9? So, I'd say that's also no good. No good, no good. For some reason, I'm not able to let my answer eliminator hold. But anyway, A and B, no good. C, Thompson was finally recognized for the photograph, but she was too busy to appreciate it. Again, where's your evidence, right? D, Thompson's image was supposed to aid people in situations similar to hers, yet she gained nothing from it. That sounds pretty ironic to me, if I know what irony means, right? You know, the whole point is to bring attention to the poverty of so many people across the country. Yet, what good did it do? It did her no good, right? If you don't know what irony means, though, that's still the only true statement of the 4 that you have to choose from. You can even kind of figure out what irony means because all 4 of those questions show contrast, right? She was the focus of the photos, but nobody ever noticed her. They all have a but or a yet in the middle, meaning opposites. All right? So D is the correct answer for question 2. And let's see, I'm already going on 11 minutes for 2 questions. So I lied. I am not going fast. All right, question 3. I'm going to answer one more question, and then I'm going to do a video for the other ones as well. All right, question 3. Which statement best describes how the authors of both passages present their information? Okay, now we're getting into integration of knowledge and ideas. Or another way to put that is synthesizing 2 texts. So looking at 2 different texts and comparing and contrasting them to gain a bigger understanding of a topic. We spent lots of time this year on this topic. So, again, which statement best describes how the authors of both passages present their information? So this is not as easy as the first 2 because we're not just looking at the role of 1 or 2 little paragraphs. We have to consider the entirety of both articles. And this is going to require, this question really justifies careful annotation because if you read carefully and slowly through the 2 articles and make notes and highlight, then you are not going to need to go back to try to understand the text to answer the question. And again, I cannot emphasize enough, go slowly and carefully through the text in the first place with your annotating so that you feel like you understand them well enough that you don't need to hunt and peck or reread. All right, so take a minute to read all 4 of those answers to yourself right now. Are there any answers that you can eliminate outright because you just know that they're not correct? That's always the first best thing to do. So what will help you the most is if you can recognize that in the first article, Snapping an Iconic Photo, there is pretty much nothing about Florence Thompson in this passage at all, right? There is only Dorothea Lange's reflection of the moment. I'm trying to think if there's actually anything at all specifically that Thompson said. She's not even named, and that's kind of an important fact that Lange says, oh, I don't even know who this person was, and she made me famous, right? To Lange, she was just a subject. Oh, this is a great picture. She wasn't a real person. So any answer that talks about Thompson's reflections or thoughts is not correct because